Hi, my name is Eric. I'm in Emeryville, California, and I've been living on this boat for about 2 months now. I love the boat. I love living on a boat, um, and I think it's the best way to spend the pandemic and the isolation. Um, However, I get a lot of questions. People asking me, "How did you get there? How did you buy the boat? How did you choose the boat? How did you get liveaboard status?" Um, So I thought I would make this video, pack a lot of information on it, and hopefully if your plan is similar to mine, it will take you a lot less time and it's going to be a lot easier. Let me tell you a little bit about my plans for the pandemic. My plans are to get ready, get the boat ready and get myself ready to sail down the coast of California and spend time in different marinas, working from home on the boat for my tech job, and just stay there for 2 weeks in each marina, and get the feel for different places, and just make the most of the isolation. So I decided to do that towards the end of March, and I thought it would take me a month to get to buy the boat and start living on it. It took me 3 months. And hopefully with the information in this video, it will take you a lot less. There's a lot of information to cover. I'm gonna go quickly, but I'll add links in the description for more information if you're interested. Let me make a remark about buying a boat during the pandemic. So as I started looking for boats, it was the end of March, beginning of April, brokers were not busy at all. They didn't even know if they could show boats. Like it was very uncertain time. And as I started to be more serious and to start looking at visiting boats, the brokers became busy and busier and busier and busier. Would take longer and longer to answer my emails. And now they're definitely busy. Inventories are more depleted, I would say. Fewer boats available. But that being said, that's true actually for boats and RVs, both of them. People find creative ways to spend the isolation. That being said, there are still boats available. I know that for a fact. There are boats here available. I've talked to brokers. But just consider that everything will take longer during the pandemic because brokers are busy. People in the harbor are busy. Consider that as a factor, but there are still boats available, and it's worth the effort. So how do you find a boat? Number one, start on yachtworld.com. It's the database that has all the boats. Personally, I wouldn't waste any time on other sites. You can take a look at Craigslist, for instance, just for comparison. But at the end of the day, you'll be back on Yacht World. And then bookmark your searches. There's no good way in Yacht World to save your searches well. Bookmark them. You'll be looking at these boats again and again as your understanding of what's important to you gets honed. And make a spreadsheet of the boats you're interested in. I'll show you that a little bit later, what I did. One of the most important factors in buying a boat is deciding the location. Where do you want to buy? If you manage to decide early on where you want to buy, it will reduce your decision space substantially, which is what you want. At the beginning, when I was starting to look for boats, I was thinking of buying in San Diego, which is a bigger market than where I am in the Bay Area. And you can expect to pay probably 10 to 15% less in San Diego for a similar boat than you would here. So I looked at a lot of boat listings, mostly focused in California because of travel restrictions. But let's look at different markets in general. So the Caribbean will be cheaper, but probably the cheapest market. You'll have a lot of hurricane damaged boats and charter boats, which are typically in not as good condition, and often it'll be there's a different layout in the boat for owner versions and charter versions. So the owner version will have a bigger stateroom, bigger rooms in general, whereas especially for catamarans, but also for monohulls. Whereas the charter boat will have smaller rooms. In general, try to get the owner's version if there's both. In terms of California, so and then there's also Florida, which is a very big market, the biggest market in the US. And you'll have also cheaper boats and more choices. You'll also have more blue water boat, because a lot of people will sail to the Caribbean, whereas in California, most people, unless they want to go to Hawaii or to the South Pacific, they'll stay in coastal waters. In terms of California, San Diego is the biggest market, and actually probably the whole West Coast, San Diego is the biggest market. However, there are a lot of boats in Oregon and Washington, but they have winters there, which can be tough on boats. California weather is very mild and good for boats. Now, I'm in the Bay Area. There are a little bit fewer boats here, especially blue water sailing boats. But there's a big advantage of being local. And if you're not going to be local, so if you're not going to buy in your market, in the place where you are based, you may consider temporarily moving to the market you're interested in. So at the end of the day, I bought a boat that was local to San Francisco Bay Area, Emeryville, near Berkeley. I'm very happy with that because there's a whole process of moving on a boat. It's if it's the first boat you're buying, first of all, there's a lot you need to learn. You want to be exposed to the previous owner as much as possible. Spend time visiting the boats, talking to the brokers in person, and then downsizing from a house to a boat is a whole process. It's not like just you can pack your stuff in a U-Haul and move there and just put stuff. It's a process. You need to consider that. If it had been for moving to San Diego, it would have been a harder. I would have had a harder time. It would have taken longer. And we'll talk about that later. But when we talk about storage, but you definitely will want to have a storage unit close to your boat. Where you can put a lot of the stuff, especially that you're downsizing from a house to a boat, but you also will need equipment frequently that you'll put in your storage unit. If you're going to buy a boat in a different market, you may consider hiring a captain to help you bring the boat to your local area, and if you do that, I would be part of that trip. I would go there and learn my boat with the captain as they come. So if I had moved to San Diego, I would have hired a captain in San Diego to bring it here, and I would have been part of that trip. You're gonna get on Yachts World. You're gonna start looking at boats. You're gonna start talking to agents. Then get a buyer's agent. So just like a house, there's a buyer's and a seller's agent. And you want to get a buyer's agent who's going to help you make price comparisons and answer your questions and things like that. So what I did is I started talking to seller's agents, and I found one that I vibed well with, and I made him my buyer's agent. And then when I had boats that I was interested in, I would run them by him and get price comparisons, and then he would help me make an offer on the boat. So he was more on my side, and more objective. Definitely something you want to do. And you don't pay anything for the buyer's agent. They will split the commission with the seller's agent. Instead of the seller's agent making 100% of the commission, which is the seller who's paying, not you, they'll split it 50-50, for instance. So no additional cost to you, no additional cost to the seller. they just basically, the two agents basically split the commission. Definitely something you want to do. Let's talk about storage. So storage on a boat, especially on smaller boats, is really critical. And I'm not talking about small things, you know, like cans and food and smaller items. You'll always find nooks and crannies to put them. I'm talking about big items, sporting equipments, your extra sails, your power tools. You'll want large areas where you can, large bins where you can put those. Consider probably that one of your berths is going to be transformed into a storage unit. That's what I do with my quarter berth right now. And then look under the beds, look under the sofas. So consider where you're going to put your big stuff. And then you're going to want to also get a public storage unit not far from your home base, right? So my home base is Emeryville, and I have a storage place here. Especially if you're downsizing from a home to a boat, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you're going to put in there. You know, tools, equipment, in my case, my TV, my former bed. So I have two storage units, 5x10, that are completely full. Okay, so let's talk about the purchase price and other costs. The main factors that are going to affect the price are you buying a monohull or a multi-hull, like a catamaran, how old the boat is, and how long it is. So multi-hulls are much more expensive and costly to own than monohulls. In Northern California, where I am, even though there's a lot of rich people here, you see very few multi-hulls, which is somewhat surprising, but I think it's because you have such big waves here, and if you capsize a catamaran, that's it, you can't flip it back up. That being said, catamarans are faster, they're more comfortable, they can navigate in shallower water. So let's say if you want to go to the Bahamas. So depending where you are and what's your budget, you might consider it. For me, multi-hull was not an option. You want to look at how old it is. So you can look up sailboat depreciation schedules online. So make sure that you're looking at a depreciation schedule for the type of boat that you have. So for instance, power boats will depreciate twice as fast as a sailboat. I think that's because the engine is such a big part of the purchase price. So that's number one. And two, you can accumulate more hours on the engine on the power boat than you do on a sailboat. So the more hours you have, the more it depreciates. But I'll give you the rule of thumb that I use, and that allows me to make quick calculations in my head and quick decisions. So essentially, for a brand new boat, you lose 20% of the value on the first year. Actually, by the time you take it out of the dealership, you lost 20%. And then after that, you'll depreciate 5% approximately per year after that. And maybe after 20 years, it will stop depreciating significantly. So then it only depends on how well it was constructed and how well the previous owner took care of the boat. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about the previous owner, how much maintenance was performed on the boat, what are the improvements that were made. Some boats, by the time you reach 20 years, there will be money pits, and sometimes you'll have great value, which is the case in this boat. But essentially it will stop depreciating at the time. The other big factor is the length of the boat. So the longer it is, the more expensive it is. So I think for the sales price of the boat, it will vary with the cube of the length, because it's a function of the volume, how much material was in the boat. And the beam and the draft and up to the freeboard will also vary with the length. So it's going to be roughly a cube relationship for the sales price. For the maintenance cost, I think it's going to be more of a square relationship, because it's more like how much paint you need to buy, and that's a function of the area. So cube relationship for sales price, square relationship for maintenance, and then the other big thing is the rent of the slip. If you want to live in a marina, you're going to pay rent, and that rent will vary with the total length. Total length means it includes the bowsprit, includes if you have davits in the back, the total length. Now, sometimes it will be a linear relationship, and you'll just have a price per foot. Okay, so if we look at the marina where I am, the Emery Cove Marina, you see that there's a price per foot, and then downwind slips will be cheaper than upwind slips, but they're a little bit more difficult to dock into, and if you want to change your sails, you want to back into the slip. And then sometimes you'll have a super linear relationship because the price per foot will increase as the boat gets bigger, and so you'll need a wider and bigger slip. So let's look at an example here. This is the West Point Marina in Redwood City, and so you see that depending on the size of the boat, the price per foot will increase. And there's also where you buy the boat, like in which market you buy the boat, but we've talked about that, and it shouldn't be your main consideration. Now let's look at equipment. I could have afforded a boat 10 to 20 times more expensive than the one I bought, but it's the first boat I buy. I want to maximize the learning and the adventure, and I don't want to be overly worried about the investment that I made in the boat. There's another consideration is all the other equipment you're going to buy for the boat. So you'll buy, maybe you need a dinghy, a life raft, EPIRB, a water maker, a wind vane, things like that will add up. If you buy a new boat, all that extra will be a tiny fraction of what you pay. So let's say you want to buy a dinghy at $5,000, and you bought a boat for $35,000. Well, that will be maybe like 14% of the price of the boat. That's very substantial. If the boat that you bought was, $250,000, then the cost of the dinghy will be tiny fraction. So if you're gonna buy a used boat where all that extra equipment is a substantial amount, then you really want to think about buying a boat that already has it, if possible. So if you're gonna make a list of the equipment that you want, and maybe it might be nice to have, and you're gonna weigh those equipment in when you make the decision of buying the boat. Otherwise, if you're gonna buy it new, it's gonna be very substantial, as we said. So you're gonna try to potentially buy it used as an add-on. Don't assume that it's going to be easy to buy these equipment used. Okay, EPIRB you can buy used. Dinghies are surprisingly hard to buy used, and there's other things that are potentially easier, but wind vane are very hard to find. I've not been able to find a wind vane that was used in good condition. So there are places where you can buy used equipment. There's one place that's called Blue Pelican here in Northern California. It's not extremely cheap. You can also look at eBay, but usually the shipping costs are so high that it's not really worth it. Craigslist can be a good option. I have a tiny car, so it's a little bit easier to go get the equipment if you have a truck. That's an option, but don't assume that you'll be able to easily find used equipment. So you want to decide what type of boat you want. So depending on how many living amenities you have, you'll have at the top the liveaboard, which is not necessarily a boat that's meant for sailing long distances. You've got a cruiser racer, then a racer. So I was initially looking for a cruiser that I could, that was a solid sailing boat I could take offshore, but that I could also live aboard. I ended up with a cruiser racer, and so I'm spending my energies now adding living amenities inside, and I'll show you that in a future video. And then you can look at the design of the boat and how it affects seaworthiness. This is a big topic. I can't cover that in this video. It's outside of the scope. I can give you some pointers and resources to look them up. So how is the construction? Is it a solid boat, or is it a flimsy boat? Some boats that are very popular, like the Hunters, have a reputation of being pretty flimsy, and some other boats, like the Tartans, have a reputation of being built very strong and being blue water cruisers. The sail plan, do you want a sloop like this boat? Do you want a cutter? Do you want a ketch? So this is something you might want to investigate. The length of the boat, the longer it is, the faster it's going to go. The hull speed is proportional to the square root of the length of the boat. Then you've got the PHRFs. This is a handicap for racing. So let's say that for a given race, the nominal PHRF is 100. If your boat has a PHRF of 110, then you'll be expected to be 10% slower. If you have a PHRF of 90, you'll be expected to be 10% faster. Sail area to displacement, ballast to displacement, capsize ratio, those are things that you can calculate, or sometimes they'll give them to you. And you might want to put them, if you have two boats that you're considering, you might want to calculate them and put them in your spreadsheet to compare. There are many other numbers that you can calculate and indicators. Those are the ones that I used, and they've been helpful for me. If you want to learn more about these, I recommend these two books. I'll add the links in the description, and there's also many resources online that you can use. So let's talk about the previous owners. I was very lucky with the previous owners. They took really great care of the boat. They answered all my questions. They're still answering my questions, actually. They took me sailing. They showed me all the systems. The guy was a private airplane pilot for many of the Silicon Valley big shots, and he was very knowledgeable about boats and sailing, very diligent. So now they're upgraded to a bigger boat. But yeah, the owner makes a big difference. Don't just talk to the broker. Try to spend as much time with the previous owner as you can, and see how they use the boat, how they took care of it, and why they're selling it. Okay, so why does it take so long to find the right boat? Or at least, why did it take me so long to find the right boat? So number one, you'll want to understand all these design criteria, design factors that I talked about, and what's available, and how do they affect the prices. But mostly, you need to understand what's important to you. So you will, how are you going to use the boat? And do you want some serious cruising boat? Do you just want to have parties on it? Do you just want to live aboard and work on the boat? So maybe watch some YouTube channels of people living the lifestyle that you want, and do some mental simulation. Imagine yourself in different boats and how different design criteria would affect your experience. And so your broker, the first thing that they'll ask you is, what are you looking for? And it's not an easy question to answer. You're gonna have to spend some time reading and browsing Yacht World before you can truthfully answer that question. So obviously, if it's your first time buying a boat, you won't know at the beginning. Do your research. Another point to consider is the advice that you're going to get. You're going to receive a lot of well-meaning advice from knowledgeable people, including your broker, and that advice may be wrong for you. So try to understand where the advice is coming from and how does it apply to you and what you're looking for. Everybody is looking for different things. Personally, I would never have picked this boat if I had blindly followed advice, for many reasons, including it's an older boat, it's not a well-known brand, etc., etc. But I'm very happy with it so far. So listen to advice, ask for advice, but be careful in not following the advice blindly. Now let's talk about interior design and cockpit design and aesthetics. Those are very personal choices. I can only give you some insights that I've had when I look at a lot of boats and was trying to decide what I liked. The first thing that I realized was that after a long time searching was that I needed to decouple the pristine aesthetics from good interior design and good cockpit design. What I mean by that is that you can have a great design, wide, beamy interior, light colors, uh, you know, functional cockpit, and still have a lot of blemishes like scratches, scrapes on the floor, and those don't bother me. Actually, I don't want a boat that's pristine because I'm gonna be worried to scratch it, right? I want to optimize for the experience that I'm gonna have, the adventure, and the learning, and versus trying to look rich and having a beautiful pristine boat. However, I still want a good design. I still want a functional interior. I want to feel good in the interior. I like lighter colors. Older boats from the 70s and 80s, if you look at those, they're they can be great boats, but they'll look dark and not as inviting. Whereas more recent boat will have, instead of teak, they'll have maybe holly or elm or other woods that are lighter in color. I do love the swim platform in the back. I don't have one on my boat. I like to have space on the cockpit to sunbathe and do other things. I found a way to adapt my boat to that. I'll show you that in a later video. But the other thing to consider also is, on smaller boats, if you want to have a big cabin in the back, the aft cabin, you can consider having a center cockpit boat, which is going to be a little bit more expensive, but you'll have a roomier stateroom, like this Hunter Passage 42. Look at how beautiful this room is. Yeah. And another cool design interior, you can have Phrf interiors, which is so white panelings with some darker trim pieces. Those look pretty classy in general. But again, those are personal preferences. You're gonna have to look and see what you like. So you found your boat, congratulations. So what now? Well, now you work with the buyer's agent to make an offer. So you find comparisons of previously sold boats and boats that are on the market and find a price point. Don't be afraid to go low. Some of the sellers are pretty motivated, although in this market, don't expect to bargain too much. So then they'll accept the price, and it will be contingent on you getting an inspection. So you'll find a surveyor, and they will spend the whole day inspecting the boat. Be there when they inspect the boat, because you're gonna learn a lot, both about the boat and about boats in general. It's very educative. They'll typically start the inspection with the boat in the water, then they'll lift the boat out of the water, they'll inspect the hull, and they'll wash it and look at the through hulls and test the through hulls and all that, and they'll give you a report, and based on that you can sometimes negotiate a little bit of money if there's things that were hidden when you looked at the boat originally. And once you have the survey, then you're gonna want to get insurance for your boat. So if you're a first-time boat buyer, it's gonna be difficult to get insurance. Don't be picky. Like, look at a lot of insurance places, ask them for quotes, and get all the options. So for instance, if you're going to be a liveaboard, there's going to be something called a liveaboard endorsement that you're going to get, and that's good. It allows you to have some additional coverage on your boat and also on your storage unit. So typically the storage units will ask you to have insurance, and if you have a liveaboard endorsement, that covers your storage unit. And then you're also going to look at the navigation. So navigation, what it means is where you are allowed to sail the boat and still be covered. So if you intend to go down the coast like me, then you want to get a specific navigation for all the different places that you want to be able to go. And my plan is that at the beginning I'm going to get everything on the insurance, and then as I get better at sailing, get more familiar with the boat, get experience with the boat, then I'll be able to renegotiate and I'll know what coverage I actually need, and potentially get another insurance provider that didn't accept me the first time because I was a first time boat owner, that will potentially allow me to go with them, and then it'll give me some leverage to negotiate with my own insurance as well. So at the beginning my plan is to get the not be worried about how much I pay for insurance, which is not that much actually, and then later on I'll be able to negotiate. So then you'll get insurance, and then how do you get liveaboard status? That's difficult. So in California, in general, the average is 10% liveaboard status. So 10% of the people in the marinas will be able to have liveaboard status, and that means there can be very long lines. That's in theory. In practice, if you're an actual sailor and you actually sail the boat, and also a slip owner, so if you want to own the slip, then you'll get put on the top of these lists sometimes. So you have to really talk to the harbor master and understand, if there's ways to skip the long, like 1 year or 2 years and 3 years waiting list to be a liveaboard person. And if you don't get that liveaboard status, typically they'll still give you trial periods or temporary liveaboard, like 3 months or 2 months or 1 month, and then you'll be able to move from marina to marina. So there are ways around it. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful, and next time I'll be showing you how I made the boat more livable and how I'm getting it ready for the big adventure ahead.